The moment that changed everything didn't happen in a boardroom. It didn't happen during some dramatic argument at midnight. It happened at 6:34 in the morning, on a tarmac at San Francisco International Airport, in front of 8 employees who all pretended not to look at me while clearly memorizing every detail. Helena was already on the jet. I could see her through the oval window, her dark hair pulled back the way she wore it when she wanted to mean business. She didn't even come down the steps. She sent her assistant, a 26-year-old named Tiffany, who had the kind of practiced sympathy that gets rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Mr. Voss," Tiffany said, clutching her iPad to her chest. "Helena wanted me to let you know that this trip is for core company stakeholders only. She said the guest list needed to be streamlined." I stood there on that tarmac with my carry-on bag in my hand and 8 sets of eyes pretending to study the morning fog rolling in off the bay. The jet engines were already humming. The coffee I'd bought at the terminal was still hot in my other hand. "She said family only?" I asked. Tiffany blinked. "She said core stakeholders." "I'm sorry, Mr. Voss." Here's the part nobody tells you about moments like that. You don't feel rage right away. You don't cry. What you feel is a strange, almost clinical clarity, like every unnecessary thought in your brain just goes quiet, and what's left is only the most essential truth. And the truth was this: Helena had just made the single biggest mistake of her business career. She just didn't know it yet. I picked up my bag. I took a long sip of my coffee. I looked up at that oval window one more time, smiled at nobody in particular, and walked back toward the terminal. By the time their jet was wheels up over the Pacific, I was already on my laptop. Before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because the story I'm about to tell you is one that took me 46 years, 2 decades of building something from the ground up, and one very cold morning on a tarmac to fully understand. If you've ever poured everything you had into something, only to have someone else try to take the credit, or worse, cut you out entirely, this one's for you. Like this video, drop a comment below, telling me, have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? I read every single one. Now, let's go back to the beginning. My name is Cassian Voss. I'm 46 years old and I'm a software architect, which basically means I'm the person who figures out how to make complicated digital systems actually work together without falling apart. I've been doing it since I was 22 years old, writing code in a studio apartment in the Sunset District with 3 roommates and a futon that had more springs than cushion. I met Helena Voss, Helena Drake back then, at a tech conference in downtown San Francisco 11 years ago. She was presenting a pitch for her startup, a boutique digital agency she'd been building for 3 years called Luminary Group. Smart concept, sharp execution, genuinely interesting vision. I stayed after the panel to ask her a question about her back-end infrastructure, and 3 hours later we were still talking over cold coffee at a table in the corner of the convention center. Helena was brilliant. I want to make that absolutely clear, because nothing that happened later changes that fact. She had an eye for clients, a gift for relationships, a way of walking into a room and making everyone in it feel like the most important person she'd talked to all week. That's rare. That's genuinely rare. Luminary Group was hers, built by her instincts, her hustle, her relationships. I never disputed that. What Helena was not was technical. When we started dating, Luminary was bringing in decent revenue, maybe $3.5 million a year, running on basic project management software and a patchwork of third-party tools that didn't talk to each other well. Helena spent more time dealing with operational fires than she spent doing the creative and strategic work she was actually exceptional at. About 18 months into our relationship, she asked if I could help. Not run anything, not take over, just look at the systems and see what I could do. I want to be honest with you. What I built over the next 2 years changed everything. I called it the Luminary operating system, though officially it never had a name because I never officially charged for it. It was a fully custom software platform, built from scratch, that integrated every function of the agency: client onboarding, project tracking, billing, resource allocation, team communication, performance reporting. Not a subscription tool, not a combination of apps. A single, purpose-built system designed specifically for the way Helena's agency worked. I coded it myself, nights and weekends at the beginning, then full-time after I married Helena, and we agreed I'd step back from my consulting work for a year to really dig into this. That year turned into 3. The platform had a dashboard that gave Helena real-time visibility into every active client engagement. It automated the billing cycle that used to take her finance coordinator 2 days every month. It had a proprietary reporting engine I built that generated client performance reports in minutes instead of the 4 to 6 hours her team was spending manually. It had security architecture I designed to meet enterprise-level compliance requirements, which is the reason Helena was able to close the Meridian financial contract, a deal worth $9 million over 3 years that became the backbone of the company's expansion. Meridian's procurement team had done a full technical audit before signing. Their head of security told Helena directly that the platform architecture was the reason they chose Luminary over 3 larger competitors. I remember Helena calling me that night laughing, barely able to get the words out. "They loved the system, Cass. They actually loved it. We got the deal." We celebrated with dinner at Cotonia. She ordered the good wine. I gave a toast to the team. I did not remind her that the platform they loved was mine. I didn't think I needed to. Looking back, that was a pattern I had perfected into an art form. I was the person who showed up before the party started to set everything up, and then stepped outside the moment the guests arrived. I told myself it was because I was introverted. I told myself it was because Helena was the face of the company, and that made sense. I told myself a lot of things over those years that I now understand were just comfortable rationalizations for a dynamic I should have addressed directly a long time ago. There's a particular kind of invisible person that a lot of organizations depend on. Not the person whose name goes on the press releases. Not the one shaking hands at the client dinners. The person who makes the thing actually work. The one who gets the Sunday morning call when the server goes down. The one who rebuilds the broken integration at 11 at night without complaining because they care more about the work functioning than about being seen caring about it. I was that person at Luminary Group for 7 years. And for 7 years, I genuinely believed that the people around me understood my contribution in the way you understand water, that you might not think about it constantly, but you understand that without it, nothing else works. What I didn't account for was how easy it is for people to confuse long-term reliability with low value. When something has always worked, people stop noticing that someone made it work. And when someone stops being noticed, it becomes very easy for the people who are always in the spotlight to start believing they were always standing in it alone. Over the next 4 years, Luminary Group grew from that $3.5 million boutique agency to a firm bringing in just over $40 million in annual revenue. Helena opened offices in Los Angeles and Austin. She hired a chief operating officer, a woman named Renata Bishop, who was sharp and capable and became Helena's most trusted advisor in a way I probably should have paid more attention to. I stayed in the background. That was my preference, genuinely. I'm not a person who needs applause. I built systems. I kept things running. When something broke at 2 in the morning, I fixed it. When a client integration needed a custom API built in 48 hours, I built it. When the security audit for a Fortune 500 prospect required documentation of our platform architecture, I wrote the 73-page technical brief that cleared us. To Helena's clients, I was her husband. To her employees, I was a technical advisor, helpful and quiet. To Helena's board of directors, I was barely a footnote. I told myself that was fine. I was wrong to tell myself that. Looking back now, I can see the shift happening gradually the way a crack spreads through concrete, so slowly you don't notice until the whole section collapses. It started small. Helena stopped mentioning the platform in client conversations, started attributing its capabilities to our proprietary technology without any acknowledgement of who built it. Renata began bringing in outside technical consultants to evaluate the system, which stung a little, but I understood the business logic. Then the board started talking about a possible acquisition. A firm out of Seattle, a larger digital services company called Nexus Partners, had been circling Luminary for about 6 months. They were interested. Very interested. The platform was a significant part of what made Luminary attractive. Their due diligence team spent 2 weeks with Renata going over everything, and I was not included in a single meeting. When I asked Helena about it, she smiled, touched my arm, and said, "It's better if we keep the technical discussions internal for now. You know how these things go." I did not know how these things went. Not like that. About 3 months before the tarmac morning, Helena came home with a document I was supposed to sign. It was a reassignment agreement. In plain language, it said that any software, systems, tools, or intellectual property I had developed for Luminary Group would be formally assigned to the company in exchange for a one-time payment of $250,000. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. "This is a buyout," I said. "It's a formalization," Helena said. "Nexus needs clean IP documentation. The lawyers said we need this signed before we can move forward." "Helena, this platform is worth significantly more than $250,000 to this company. The platform was developed during our marriage, while you were informally supporting the business. This is standard." I looked at my wife across our kitchen island in the house we shared in Pacific Heights, the house with the view of the bay and the garden she had spent 2 years perfecting. And I felt that clinical clarity settle in again. "I need to think about it," I said. She nodded like it was already decided. I did not sign. The weeks between that conversation and the tarmac were strange. Cold in ways that are hard to describe. The kind of cold that doesn't announce itself but just slowly drains the warmth from ordinary moments. Dinners where we talked about logistics instead of anything real. Mornings where Helena left early for meetings I wasn't told about. The week before the jet trip, I did something I'm not particularly proud of, but I am not going to pretend I regret. I did a quiet technical audit of the platform's access architecture. I was the original developer, which meant I had designed the authentication and permissions framework. I knew exactly how every access credential, every admin key, every integration token was structured. And what I discovered was that Renata Bishop and a third-party development firm out of Austin called ClearPath Solutions had spent the past 4 months attempting to reverse engineer significant portions of my platform. They had copied entire modules, stripped my attribution from the code comments, and were building what appeared to be a Luminary 2.0 system, presumably to present to Nexus as a clean rebuild that didn't depend on any contributions from Cassian Voss. They were almost done. Almost. The morning Helena sent her assistant down those jet steps to turn me away, they were 3 weeks from completion. I walked back into the terminal, found a table near the window, opened my laptop, and started typing. Here's something about building a software system from the ground up that most people don't understand. Every system has a skeleton, and the person who built the skeleton knows exactly where every bone is. ClearPath's rebuild was impressive, genuinely impressive. They had good developers working fast, but they were building on top of my architecture without fully understanding it, which meant there were dependencies buried in their new code that still pointed back to components I controlled. I didn't destroy anything. I want to be very clear about that because this is important. I did not corrupt their system. I did not damage their data. I did not do anything. That could be called sabotage in any honest sense of the word. What I did was this. I reclaimed my own intellectual property. Specifically, I revoked the API credentials that my custom reporting engine used to communicate with their core database. I rotated the encryption keys for 3 security modules I had designed and maintained sole documentation for. And I removed my authentication framework from the integration layer, which was the backbone that made the entire client-facing portal function. None of that data was lost. None of their client information was touched. But the platform went dark. Luminary Group's entire operational system, the engine that ran every active client contract, every billing cycle, every report, every project timeline, the thing that had made a Fortune 500 company choose them over the competition, went offline at approximately 8:23 in the morning, Pacific time. The jet had been airborne for 41 minutes. I sat in that airport terminal for a while after that. I ordered another coffee. I watched a family of 4 arguing about whether to upgrade their seats on a flight to Denver. A toddler was running in circles around a rolling suitcase while his older sister rolled her eyes with the particular exhaustion of a 9-year-old who has been patient for long enough. I thought about the first time Helena and I had driven across the Golden Gate Bridge together, a Sunday afternoon, neither of us with any particular destination, just driving because we were new and wanted to stay in motion. She'd had her feet on the dashboard and the window down despite the cold, and she'd laughed at something I said with a laugh that was completely unguarded, the kind of laugh people forget to edit. I thought about the $250,000 buyout offer. I thought about Tiffany standing on those jet steps with her iPad. My phone buzzed. It was Renata Bishop. I let it go to voicemail. Over the next 4 hours, I received 14 calls. 3 from Renata, 2 from Helena's personal assistant, a man named Todd, who was always kind to me and whose concern I genuinely felt bad about. 1 from the Luminary CFO, a steady and serious woman named Patricia Chen. 4 from numbers I didn't recognize, which were almost certainly from the ClearPath development team in Austin trying to figure out what had happened to their integration layer. And then, finally, 4 from Helena herself. I answered the fourth one. She didn't start with hello. "The system is down," she said. Her voice was controlled in the way a person's voice is controlled when they are working very hard not to sound as panicked as they feel. "Cassian, the whole platform is down. We have the Meridian quarterly review in 6 hours and we cannot pull a single report." "I know," I said. Silence on the line. The kind of silence that has texture. "What do you mean you know?" "I mean, I'm aware that the system is offline. I was the one who took it offline." More silence. Longer this time. "You did this on purpose." "Helena, your company has been building a replacement for my platform using my own architecture as a foundation, without my knowledge or consent, and then trying to buy me out for $250,000 before the acquisition closed. I would say I did this because I was left with very few other options." Her voice changed then. The control started to give. "Cassian, there are clients. There are people's jobs on the line. There are contracts. I know. I built the system that holds all of those contracts. You need to bring it back online, right now. I will, when we have a real conversation, one that involves my attorney, and a fair accounting of the intellectual property I developed for this company over 7 years." The line was quiet for a long moment. I could hear airport noise in the background on her end. Wherever she had landed, she hadn't gone far. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "About ClearPath? A few weeks." "And you waited." "I wanted to see if you would tell me yourself." Another long pause. When she spoke again, the control was gone entirely, and what was underneath it was something raw, something that sounded more like the woman from that drive across the Golden Gate Bridge than the person who had sent her assistant down those jet steps with an iPad. "I handled this wrong," she said. "Yes," I said. "You did. Come home, Cassian. I'll come. Home when we have an agreement." I want to pause here for a moment because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, why didn't he just talk to her? Why didn't he confront her the moment he found out about ClearPath? Why didn't he sit down across from Helena and say, "I know what you're doing. I need us to be honest with each other right now"? It's a fair question. The honest answer is that I had been trying to have that conversation for 3 months, in every way that wasn't the conversation itself. I left signals. I asked careful questions. I made it easy for Helena to bring it up on her own, to come to me, to say, "Here is what is happening and here is why, and let's figure out together what is fair." I wanted her to choose that. I genuinely did. Because the alternative, which is where we ended up, was something I never actually wanted, no matter how clearly I executed it once the time came. She didn't choose that. So the tarmac morning was not an impulsive decision. It was the end of a long, quiet countdown that I had given her every opportunity to stop. The next 72 hours were the most legally and emotionally complicated of my life, and I have been through a divorce, a failed startup, and a family situation involving my brother that I will not get into, but which required a lawyer and a mediator and 2 separate Thanksgiving dinners for 3 years running. My attorney was a man named Douglas Fairweather, who I had retained privately 3 weeks earlier, immediately after Helena showed me that buyout agreement. Douglas was methodical in the way that genuinely competent people are methodical, quiet about it, thorough, unhurried by anyone else's timeline. Helena's legal team was fast and expensive and extremely motivated. Nexus Partners' acquisition was contingent on a clean IP resolution, and every hour the platform stayed offline was a liability they could feel in real numbers. I was not unreasonable. I want to be honest about that too. Douglas and I went into those conversations with 3 clear asks. First, formal documentation crediting my authorship and architectural contribution to the Luminary operating system across all relevant company records and any materials provided to Nexus as part of the acquisition. Second, fair market valuation of my IP contribution, not a flat buyout number pulled out of the air, but an actual appraisal conducted by an independent technical evaluator. Third, a consulting agreement that reflected the reality of my ongoing involvement, since even ClearPath's rebuild still had dependencies on my architecture that would require my input for a minimum of 18 months after any acquisition closed. The independent appraisal came back 12 days later. The IP contribution was valued at $4.3 million. The platform I had built for $250,000 was worth $4.3 million. Nexus countered at 3.8. We settled at 4.1, plus the consulting agreement, plus the formal attribution documentation. Douglas shook my hand at the end of the meeting, which for Douglas was basically the equivalent of a standing ovation. I moved out of the Pacific Heights house the week after the agreement was signed. Not dramatically, not with anger. I packed my things in the same methodical way I pack anything, efficiently and without excess, and I moved into a furnished apartment in the Mission District while Helena and I figured out what the rest of our lives were going to look like. We are separated, not yet divorced, though that conversation is ongoing. The honest answer to what I feel about Helena is complicated in the way that 11 years of real life is always complicated. I don't hate her. I'm not sure I can stop loving her entirely, or if that even happens in a clean, sudden way outside of movies. What I know is that she made choices that treated me as something other than a partner. Not just on that tarmac and not just with that buyout offer, but in a long, slow series of decisions that gradually moved me from the center of something we were supposed to be building together to the edge of something she was building on her own. I also know that I let that happen for longer than I should have, that I confused staying quiet with being humble, that I convinced myself that not needing recognition was the same as not deserving it, and those are two completely different things. About 6 weeks after I moved out, I ran into Todd, Helena's assistant, at a coffee place on Valencia Street. He was getting a cold brew to go, and he stopped when he saw me with the expression of a person who is genuinely uncertain whether they are allowed to acknowledge you. I waved him over. "How is everything?" I asked. Todd did the thing where he thought about giving me the professional answer and then decided not to. "Honestly, it's been a lot. The Nexus deal closed last week. Renata got a very nice package. Tiffany got promoted." "And Helena?" He hesitated. "She's good, working hard. I think she's..." He paused, choosing the words carefully. "I think she's thinking about things differently than she was before." I nodded. "She asks about you," he said. "Not in a weird way, just, she asks." I thanked him and let him get back to his day. I'm writing this from my apartment in the Mission. It's a Sunday morning, which is the best kind of morning in San Francisco, when the fog is still thick enough to make the city feel like it belongs only to the people who choose to be in it before 10 a.m. I have my coffee. I have my laptop. I have a new consulting project that has nothing to do with Luminary Group, a healthcare data firm in South San Francisco that needs a new integration architecture and has an interesting problem I've been thinking about all week. My life is not what I expected it to be at 46, but I'll tell you something I've learned. Something I wish someone had told me about 12 years ago before I started quietly handing pieces of myself over to something that wasn't treating them as valuable. The work you do has worth whether or not anyone is counting it. The systems you build, the problems you solve, the things you quietly make function in the dark, while everyone else is taking credit in the light, those things have real value. Documented, measurable, legal, financial value. And the moment you stop believing that, someone else will happily let you go on not believing it because it's very convenient for them. Cassian Voss spent 7 years building something extraordinary, and then one cold tarmac morning he remembered it belonged to him. I'm not going to tell you how the story ends because I'm still inside it. The consulting agreement runs 18 months. The divorce conversations continue. The apartment in the Mission has decent light in the afternoon. And somewhere in a server room in Seattle, a platform I built from nothing is running exactly the way I designed it to, doing exactly what I intended, for clients who will never know my name. But I know my name. And that, it turns out, is enough. Look, I've been sitting with this story for a while now. And the thing that gets me isn't the money. It's not the jet. It's not even the platform. It's the fact that Cassian spent 7 years believing that doing good work quietly was enough. And a lot of us are doing the exact same thing right now, in our jobs, in our relationships, somewhere. We think loyalty speaks for itself. It doesn't. You have to speak for yourself, because the people who benefit most from your silence will never be the ones to break it for you. That part's on you.